Introduction. And good morning or evening to all of the participants, and thank you for your attendance and for being here today. And welcome to this webinar on benefits and challenges of open data in land administration, which is jointly organized by the Working Party of Land Administration for the UNECE region and the Land Registries Association of Spain. Well, my name is Pilar Verdejo García. I'm a property and mercantile registrar of Spain. I'm also a member of the International Affairs team of the Land Registries Association of Spain and a bureau member of the Working Party since May 2021, and also contact point at the Ibero-American Land Registries Association. So today we will be here in this webinar that, as Amy said, is under the umbrella of the scenario study on the future of land administration, which was developed by the Working Party. And this is the third of the 5 webinars organized this spring. You can read about them in our website, and they are all afterwards recorded and uploaded if you want to watch them afterwards. In today's webinar, we will be talking about benefits and challenges of open data in land administration. As we all know, open data policies are essential for sustainable development, solving societal challenges and enabling innovation. However, it is important to articulate mechanisms that prevent fraud and that warranty an adequate protection of personal data and when we're giving open data. So this webinar will focus on the debate of to what extent land registry information should be made open, considering aspects such as the complexity of information, the protection of personal data, and the risk for fraud. So today we will be listening to different interesting speeches about these topics, which will be presented by experts in law and geospatial information. So I would like to welcome our speakers and thank them for being here today and tell you a bit about the organization of today's webinar. We will have 4 interventions. On the first place, we will have Mr. João Antonio Pinto Montero, who is professor in civil law at the University of Coimbra and who will talk us about open data versus data privacy, its tendencies, advantages, and drawbacks. After that, we will have Mr. Mihai Taus, Land Registrar of Romania, who will talk us about the EU models of registered publicity. We will afterwards have Ms. Jimena Campuzano, Land Registrar of Spain, who will talk us about land registries preventing challenges when having open data, mainly with fraud and money laundering. And finally, we'll have a joint presentation given by the Land Portal, represented by Mr. Charles Tom Bayer and Ms. Natalia Carfi, who will be presenting the Open Up Guide on Land Governance. As Amy said, at the end, we will have a time for questions and answers and a short debate. So I would kindly ask you to wait until the end of the presentations to make your question, but you can always leave them at the chat and raise your hand at the end of it. So now we will start, and I will give the floor to our first speaker, who is Mr. João Antonio Pinto Montero. As I said, he's a law professor at the University of Coimbra, where he teaches law of obligations, civil contracts, and European contract law. He holds a doctorate in law from the University of Coimbra, as well as a master's degrees in law from both the University of Coimbra and Columbia Law School. He has also been a visiting scholar at the Columbia Law School and Harvard Law School. As I said, he will be talking us about open data versus data privacy, its tendencies, advantages, and drawbacks. So please, João, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me fine. And I would like to begin my communication by sincerely thanking UNECE Working Party on Land Administration, as well as the Colegio de Registradores de la Propiedad, Mercantiles y de Bienes Muebles de España. My apologies for my inadvertently lacking pronunciation, for organizing this important gathering for the exchange of ideas on the benefits and challenges of open data on land administration, and for inviting me to take part in such a relevant event. I'd also like to take the opportunity to congratulate Ms. Pilar Verdejo for a clear, sharp, and succinct introduction of the main issues at hand, and greet my fellow speakers, Mr. Mihai Taus, Ms. Jimena Campuzano, and Ms. Natalia Carfi, illustrious colleagues who joined me in this panel. They will take on the demanding task, or the more demanding task, of facing more specific topics than my own, and will certainly do so masterfully and with aplomb, thereby hopefully absolving me for my sin of my broader presentation of the main features and advantages of the dissemination of open data. Speaking of advantages, this presentation might also be just a bit more Penglosian than could be expected, more optimistic. And if so, that will be because I will chiefly pour over open data as a generally beneficial tool, both to individual and collective interests. To this end, I will present a synopsis of the context that gave rise to it, its applications, and its importance, but without forgetting the potential double-edged nature associated with any opportunity for public dissemination of data. For this reason, and surely many others, I would lastly like to thank our audience in advance for their generous patience and attentions, both of which are greatly appreciated. So, what can we really call open data, and what is it good for? Well, the origin of a concept is sometimes as important as its main characteristic notes. And when it comes to the origin of the concept of open data, it cannot be disassociated from that of open government. That is because data is open, or rather, has been becoming open in as much as government themselves. Without the open government movement, I very much doubt we would be speaking about open data as we currently understand it, or at the very least, data would not be open to the extent it has become. Therefore, it is unavoidable that a very brief initial mention be made to our governments, and therefore also public data have been rendered open. And simply put, an open government is one whose main characteristics are those of transparency, participation, and collaboration. In this sense, a government that is open is one that welcomes scrutiny and contributions from citizens, the civil society at large, and various organizations, so as to promote a higher degree of involvement by all to further a sense of collective good. The need for a more transparent state that fosters public participation is not a new one. In the last few years, questions of transparency and public involvement have been inspired by the development of new technologies. These questions have been posed within the frame of the open movements, such as open source, open software, etc., and have been given an important political impulse worldwide from 2008 onwards, when several governments, among which those of the United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand, began divulging and implementing measures aimed at making their information public. On a global scale, the appearance of initiatives like the Open Government Partnership, created in September 2011, and whose chief goals are the promotion of transparency, the fight against corruption, and the assignment of more power to their citizens, blew wind into the sails of the movement to open up governments. It is important to point out in this context that the countries that comprise this partnership bind themselves to achieving goals in openness and transparency upon accession. In this political setting, one of the concerns that most of these countries share is the availability of information from the public sector. In other words, these with which their citizens and society in general are able to gain access to data produced by governments and their administration. Access to information from the public sector has acquired a new importance also in light of technological advances that allow both for access to information in more technical fashion, as well as for the reutilization of the same information for different ends. The emergence of platforms and collaborative models and the growth of the open movements, again, think open source and open software, have reinforced the conditions for a higher degree of public participation in society. For this reason, governments have been pushed into rethinking and redefining their role as producers and purveyors of information, a task which they have embraced by bolstering the levels of public data made available and by promoting their easy accessibility to society at large. Within the boundaries of the European Union, the reutilization of public sector information was decisive in the 2013 amendment of the Directive on the Reuse of Public Sector Information, Directive 2003/98/EC, amended by Directive 2013/37/EU. Also known as the PSI Directive, PSI for Public Sector Information, of course, this legal diploma dignified issues of economic potential of public sector information with an importance on par with that of the value of transparency. And it did so by encouraging European countries to make more public data available in formats open to civil society for reutilization, thereby fomenting the development of new products and services based on open data. In sum, the enormous quantity of open data that is generated and amassed by the state presents an equally enormous potential for use and development that may be useful not only to the state itself, but also to the society and the corporate world. And most of those data are already deemed public by law. When one talks about open data, they are then mostly speaking of government data that already are or already ought to be available to the society, which for this reason have the potential to be made open stricto sensu by guaranteeing their use in new projects. The greatest challenge and the most pressing concern stemming from the open data movement is making those data available and reusable to the benefit of various societal groups and sectors. First, to the benefit of citizens who gain immediate access to information that is theirs by their own right, which strengthens a perception of transparency and accountability of the state before their electors. Then, to the benefit of government institutions, which become more transparent and might then make themselves more efficient, which fortifies their public service role. Next, to the benefit of corporations, which may reuse public information to create applications, platforms, and services with high commercial potential. And finally, to the benefit of other sectors like journalism, academic research, or socially minded ONGs. There are indeed many examples of beneficial public data usage. This use and reuse of data is central to the concept of open data. Open data are nothing more or less than data that may be freely used, reused, and distributed by any person or persons. In other words, open data are those data that may be used without restrictions. We are considering here open data that is public in origin, but of course there are also public data that do not originate in the public sector. When it comes to public data, it is usual for the states to impose constraints to that which citizens and corporations may do with public information. The most common limits are the prohibition of their reutilization for commercial purposes, which is achieved by placing a restriction to their licensing by allowing their use only for personal ends or academic research. That is to say, even if data are available to be downloaded, a citizen may not reuse them without limitations. This is indeed one of the biggest causes of the movement for open data, that of the abolition of any limitation to their commercial use. That is to say, the promotion of the idea that any person or entity may use, transform, or adapt public data to make a profit off it. Open data from the public sector may refer to information stemming from a host of sectors of the public administration and their activity, such as public contracting, public employment, economic and financial statistics, public expense and profit, election results, transportation schedules, and so on. Some of said data may already be publicly available, but again, for any set of governmental data to be classified as open, it is necessary that there are no restrictions and barriers in place to its access and use, be they legal or political, technological or financial. Therefore, one must differentiate true open data from data that are simply made accessible to the public. Open data are always under open licenses, which allow for their commercial reuse. We cannot nonetheless forget that not all public sector information should be made public. There are vast sets of data from the public administration that must continue under restricted access, be it for security reasons, legal reasons, or limitations brought about by citizens' right to privacy. Open data policies do not require that all government information be opened up, just that information which can, or those elements of information which can be considered public. Decisions regarding the accessibility of data from specific sectors are to be emitted by the entities that run them in tandem with organizations and commissions on data protection, like the Comissão Nacional de Proteção de Dados in my own country of Portugal. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, states in its Article 19 that everyone has the right of freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. There is a clear individual benefits stemming from this fundamental human right to information and freedom, but ultimately by allowing any citizen ease and freedom of access to data produced or collected by the government, it is the society as a whole that benefits. In the past few decades, the rapid development of information and communication technologies and the democratization of access to platforms and technological structures have radically changed the paradigms of creation and processing of information. There are plenty of illustrations of platforms or applications that use public information to create different kinds of value and worth. Besides the gains in transparency and citizenship, there is tremendous economic potential associated with open data generated by the public administration in the shape of a direct stimulus to the economy and job creation. Studies conducted under the European Data Portal have estimated the European direct market for open data to already be worth in the several tens of billions, over 70 billions, and job numbers created in that area to have hit around the impressive round figure of 100,000. But there are material benefits stemming from opening government data to other sectors. Many other groups of individuals and organizations may benefit from the availability of that information. For example, there are socially minded organizations to which access to open data may increase the quality of the services they render, which in some cases complement services provided by the state itself. In this sense, information held by the public administration may be very useful to those organizations since it lets them know their target audience better, the geographic concentration of the services they provide, the evolution of the sector, etc. It also allows them to test their services and measure their respective results, which in turn allows them to ever increase the quality of their activities in a virtuous feedback loop. In conclusion, the picture seems clear. Even though there already are countless sectors of activity to which open data are already producing social and economic benefits, it is still expected that many other applications become possible thanks to the growth of this tendency. More and better open data generates data combinations, which in turn give rise to new readings and interpretations and knowledge, which then inspires ideas for new fields of application. Now, I am aware I might have given rise to more questions than answers, questions which are likely to have been left unanswered in a presentation intended to be short and concise. But the truth is that these problems are topics that are still in a state of flux and suggest more questions than they offer answers, in search of which the answers, academicians, but also, and most importantly, practitioners, still have a long way to go and a pertinent role to play. I am very grateful for your attention and patience you have kindly dispensed. I earnestly hope we are able to meet again to further these themes, preferably without the still mostly unavoidable assistance of these digital means, even if there undoubtedly is a certain advantageous openness about these online platforms themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joao. It was a really interesting introduction. It's a very good starting point for our debate today. It gives us the scope of the topic and shows the complexity of open data policies and its implications. And as you said, there are a lot of questions unanswered, and we will have to see how it's developed afterwards and how, as you say, the practitioners, we develop it, right? So yeah, thank you for a really good synopsis on the context that gave rise to the open data and its applications, and for not forgetting the potential double-edged nature associated with the public dissemination of data. So thank you very much, Joao. So on the second place, we will have Mr. Mihai Taz. Hi, Mihai. So I'll introduce him to you. He graduated in law in 2000, and he has an expertise of 27 years in the field of land registry. He's the chief land registrar of Brasov County in Romania. He's the vice president of the Romanian Land Registrars Association and member of the board of the European Land Registries Association. So he will be talking to us about the EU models of registral publicity. So please, Mihai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pilar, for the introduction, and I'm honored to be part of this panel. Thank you. Excuse me for a moment, I tried to upload my presentation. Well, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
So my presentation is somehow complementary with the presentation of my colleagues Joao and Jimena, because we are all talking about the open data, and I particularly refer to the open data in the land registry area. And I will start saying that if we draw a map of information workflows, we might notice that there are some hot points where that affluence of information is higher than in other places. It means that data created before in different places is processed and or combined, and the outcome could be metadata or different genuine new data. These are the confluence points, and one of these places is definitely the land registry. Land registry acts as a kind of a bivalent system, because on one hand, land registry acts as a gatekeeper because it filtered information which become data available in the system. And on the other hand, it's a hub of information, because after this filter, the information is transformed and it's available depending on different regulations according to national land registry systems. As someone said, this is a gold mine of data. Why? Because depending on the scope and the level of access, land registries can provide relevant information in an easier and faster way. You just have all the information there. Moreover, land registry provides very important timestamps. There are different perspectives to be taken into consideration, because the information is not only related to what land registry provide regarding the real estates or the right, but also regarding the deeds. I will talk later about, I will come back to this topic a little bit later. This is valid for all type of land registries. I suppose this is not the right time to discuss about torrent systems or personal land registries. The question is how land registries deal with the data, especially with the personal data protected by GDPR. National land registries in Europe have very different approaches to this topic. And the European Land Registry Association made a study on this. One who's interested may find on our website some fact sheets about, for instance, land registry publicity or description of land registries. Both contain information of how land registry deals with data. These are studies based on the contribution of our contact points from more than 20 member states. Actually, the study has a broader scope, but I mentioned here that just the aspects regarding the access to land registry information. General Data Protection Regulation defines what personal data is. Any information related to an identified or identifiable natural person. So here we have some definitions regarding the data, personal data, processing of personal data, and so on. These are definitions which guide us to use a kind of standardized perceptions of these terms. And taking into consideration these definitions, I have to mention that there are also countries where access to land registry record is open, but the access to the deeds or the documents which are basis of the entry is allowed only when legitimate interest is proven. These approaches might be influenced by the social culture and legal traditions. One may find arguments in favor or against of these approaches. Also, the GDPR completely ignored the special case of the land registry, where persons make their personal data public with a very, very specific purpose, the constitution of the right or opposability against third parties. The GDPR defines what legal processing is. Most of data used by land registry is personal data. Names, personal identification numbers, addresses, and data behind the curtain. I will explain a little bit later what is this data behind the curtain. And I'm sure that there is other information that has the same status. Land registries get the information, process the information, and provide information. There should be two situations to be considered. The input of the information and the output of the information. Regarding the input of the information, things are quite easy. As far as we know, there is no restriction for data which land registry is fed with. This is natural because land registry in Europe is always a public institution and it is allowed to process personal data. It means that all kinds of personal data is available to the land registry as long as it is related to the information destined to accomplish the publicity legal requirements. When we talk about the output, it is more complicated. It depends on the type of personal data and the national approach to this topic. It is important to highlight that the title system has a kind of natural data protection envisaged for a long time before someone thought about a general regulation for data protection. It is what I was called before the data behind the curtain. So it is a principle governing the title system, meaning that land registry shall provide free access only for that information which is required to fulfill the scope of the land registry. For other information, access is granted on the proof. For other information, access is granted based on the proof of legitimate interest. Of course, this is not an example about merely personal data, but about any kind of information which is not relevant or is not necessary to be public. Now, coming back to how land registries provide access to the information, there are three things to be taken into consideration: the type of information, the type of applicant, and the fees. All systems provide basic information without any restrictions regarding the data protection. For instance, anybody can apply for a land registry cert. Some systems allows also unconditioned access to the deeds as basis of the land registry entry. Others allow access only based on a legitimate interest. Sensitive topic is regarding the searches by name. As in the previous situation, there are cases when these kind of searches are allowed unconditioned, and situations where these are allowed only for certain applicants. And this leads us to the second thing to be taken into consideration when we talk about access to information: the type of applicant. When restrictions applies, these are not applicable to public authorities such as courts, prosecutors, FIUs, police, bailiffs, and other categories. And the third issue is regarding the fees. Usually there is a fee to be paid except for public authorities. Having in mind all of this, there are questions arising. Is there a conflict between GDPR and land registry? Should we find the right balance between public information and protected information? Shall be some exceptions, and if yes, which are these exceptions, at what extent, and how to deal with exceptions? How about the right to be forgotten or the right to be informed, which is not very easy to implement in the land registry? I don't know if these issues was addressed to national land registries, but if I would be asked, I confess I'm not sure if I have the right answer. Regarding the right to be informed, I wonder if this applies to the land registry as long as the person who provides information did this exactly for this purpose, to be disclosed to third party and to take advantage of the legal benefits of the publicity. Regarding the right to be forgotten, it should be considered how land registry role will be changed if this right applies to land registry records. It is up to the national authorities to adapt their legislation to the GDPR and to harmonize the national land registry legislation to this regulation. As a matter of fact, all member states benefit of 2 years to adapt the legislation before the regulation came into force. What is to be noticed now is that land registries are used to a specific isolated national legal ecosystem, but this is going to be changed. The new reality requires that in order to remain efficient and reliable, land registry has to step out of its box and face the interconnection benefits and challenges. It is a new dimension for the land registry. Interconnection will bring the land registry to a new era. In this new environment, land registry should play an important role in social security, preventing and identifying frauds, for instance, money laundering. I will not get into details here because I'm sure that Jimena will have a very interesting presentation on this topic. But I just want to say that I was very excited to notice what new horizons are opening for the land registries in this new dimension. And as Joao said, it might be an opportunity for businesses for both public and private sectors. However, the interest for the land registry is increased because, as I think I mentioned before, European institutions noticed that the land registry can play a very important role in the security of the civil traffic and in preventing and discovering frauds. To conclude my presentation, I may say that there is a lot of diversity regarding the land registry approach to personal data. Land registry should adapt to a new dimension, but it should also preserve its role played in security of the civil traffic, which includes better services for the people with the right balance between protection of personal data and an active role in preventing fraud and providing open data. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mihai. It's been a really good summary of how land registries provide information and how important it is, as you were saying, to preserve their role to secure civil traffic and to find the balance between the data protection, the analysis of data, and then how we provide this data and how can it be used or misused by the public or private sector to its benefit, right? And it was also really interesting to listen to the right to be forgotten and how could we put this into our system, because it's something that we don't really usually talk about, and it's something that is there, and maybe a lot of people would like to to have it also introduced into our system. So thank you very much. So on the third place, we will listen to Ms. Jimena Campuzano. She's a land and mercantile registrar in Spain since 2001. She's a member of the Commission of Technology and Innovation and Geospatial Information for the Public Law Corporation of Land and Mercantile Registrars of Spain. She is also a member of the board of the Registrars Association of Spain, and she's intervened in a lot of seminars about the different topics she works in. So Jimena will be talking to us about the land registries and the open data. So Jimena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pilar. First of all, I would like to thank to UNECE Working Party on Land Administration for inviting me today to take part of this webinar. And also would like to congratulate my colleagues and previous panelists, Joao and Mihai, for the insightful presentations. And also because I'm the last one, thank you for introducing some of the concepts and ideas that I will also be contributing to. Well, first of all, about land registry and open data, we have to take into account that technological change has been, until today, key in the economic and social development of the human species. The technological revolution that we have experienced with artificial intelligence at the forefront of it can be capital in relaunching economic growth. The fourth industrial revolution in which we are immersed is based on data, which is a more ethereal element than the technological innovations that allowed the previous industrial revolutions, the steam machine, electricity, and oil, but no less valuable. We can also say that even more. Data have become a fundamental input for any economic progress and have great economic and business value. The data generated by citizens, companies, public administrations, and even by objects, now with the Internet of Things, have increased exponentially in recent years. It is from this growth in the volume, variety, and speed of data generation, and from the greater capacities for its capture, storage, processing, and analysis that the data economy emerges. New technological tools, programming languages, machine learning, new capabilities, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and new professional skills in the digital field have made it possible to generate business models around data that were unimaginable until recently. The promotion of the data economy, an economy in which technology allows a massive generation, collection, storage, and analysis of data, is one of the priorities of the European Union. We have to nowadays, legislative trends are aimed at achieve the data economy to facilitate the availability of the information to promote innovation and also competitiveness and ultimately the economy. Sorry, I don't know if you're seeing the presentation. Yes, thank you. An example of it is the European Data Act, part of the European Data Strategy, which aims to create a single data market. The European Commission, has considered it necessary to respond to the needs of the digital economy and to change the state of affairs by removing the obstacles to the availability of data. When defining the legal and political framework for data sharing and governance, all aspects of technology, standards, good practices, security and privacy must be taken into account. In addition, the evaluation of the risks and challenges in regard to security, integrity, privacy protection must not be overlooked. Legal frameworks might be a burden and a restriction, preventing innovation and development instead of enabling it. Therefore, governments find themselves in a situation where they have to strike a balance between the unappealable need to promote data economy and to secure privacy and take into account the needs of cybersecurity. In the real estate field, and specifically in the land registry, a large amount of information is concentrated: valuable information, legal, physical, and economic data, and personal data of registered right holders. In the land registries, we find information to who owns the land, description of the land, surface, boundaries, buildings, charges, and encumbrance. It is necessary to study the potential of such data and the possibility of making it accessible with artificial intelligence techniques to find trends, make predictions, and generate new businesses and services. When connecting the necessary information of the data economy and all this information contained, stored in the land registries, different aspects and circumstances have to be considered. First of all, it must be taken into account that the mission of the land registries is not to obtain data. Its purpose and objective are not to generate or collect data. Property registries are not simple databases. They are not just information stores. Their fundamental task is to provide a public service available to the citizens. The mission of the property registry is to achieve legal certainty in real estate traffic in terms of property rights and the rights of third parties with respect to a specific real estate unit. Nevertheless, The development of the technology has given rise to this side effect, that the land registries have abundant information, data which can be very useful for the development of new businesses and services. This secondary effect, although very important, cannot transform the nature of the institution and pervert or put in second place the purpose of existence of land registries, to be a public service. Sorry, because I think I'm going faster than the presentations. Here I am. So excuse me for that. Another thing we have to take into account is that this information is stored in the land registry has a value beyond the value of the underlying asset, land building. It has a value by itself, an economic value. This raises interesting questions such as who is the owner of this information, and therefore who should access and or benefit from its potential economic return, the public administration that manages the land registry or the landowners. Who owns which data has become a crucial question, as control over data decides who can use these for further trade profiting from it. Also, as new data is likely to be generated with the use of AI, artificial intelligence, it is most important to consider relevant ethical questions, as this data might be of a sensitive nature. I'm not going to go into this because this is not a webinar about artificial intelligence, but this raises a lot of interesting questions. Another thing we have to take into account is that the majority of the information, if not all of land-related data, is personal data. The information in the registry, by its very nature, revolves around a holder, a person, the subject of the right. Therefore, in the registration information, the personal data of the registered rights holders are mixed together with legal, physical, and economical data. Personal data, as Michael already said, is any information relating to an identified or unidentifiable natural person. What is an identifiable natural person? Is one who can be identified directly or indirectly, in particular by reference to an identifier such as the name, an identification number, location data, an online identifier, or to one or more factors specific to the physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, or social identity of that natural person. Personal data concerns the right of privacy recognized in the European Convention of Human Rights as a human right. Because possessing personal data concerns the privacy of individuals, the use of personal data is regulated. In the European regulation, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. The use of this personal data requires, as a general data, a rule by GDPR regulation, the consent of the owner of the data. Said consent must be express and specific. It must be specific because it must be informed about the purpose pursued in the use of said data. Another concept that we have to take into account that Joe explained very well, thank you, Joe, is the concept of open data. Open data is a term to refer to data whose access is free and can be used, reused, and redistributed by any user who wishes without the need for a specific permission. Open data refers to data which is open for free access, use, and modification to be shared for any purpose. Open data and content can be freely used, modified, and shared by everyone. Therefore, we have two concepts that have to be connected: personal data, the protection of the right to privacy, and the necessary compliance with data protection regulations, and open data, open for free access without restriction. GDPR deals exclusively with personal data. The only situation in which GDPR directly affects open data is when open data includes personal data. As we said before, GDPR establishes that European citizens must give their clear and explicit consent to the processing of their data. Therefore, no personal data can be published for reuse without the consent of the affected party. There are a few exceptions when data can be published. For example, in the case of a court decision, and also another exception is if the data has been anonymized. Anonymization is the process of removing personally identifiable information from data. Therefore, this data can no longer be considered or referred to as personal data, and therefore is no longer subject to GDPR. An open data policy would be of little use if the data is not trustworthy. To function properly, AI needs, apart from data volume and data variety, data veracity. The truthfulness of the data is crucial. Data from a reliable source implies better accuracy. In this respect, we can be sure that the data contained in the land registry is trustworthy, reliable, and truthful data. The reason of this is because that the land registries intervene in the elaboration of the data, providing secure and reliable information. As Michael explained before me, we can be considered as gatekeepers. The authorities in charge of the land registries are not limited to storing or collecting previously existing data, but rather have an active participation in the preparation of the information. At least in Spain, there is no automatic registration on information. The information that arrives to the register does not automatically access it. This information must go through a filter, through a control that the law attributes exclusively to land registers, to property registers. They are legally assigned the task of controlling the legality of all the acts and transactions that access the registry. They are the ones who decide if these acts and transactions that seek to access the registry are in accordance with current legislation, that there is no fraud, and therefore that they are worthy of registry protection. This allows the filtering of the information, providing that the information is stored, that the data stored in the property registry is totally reliable and truthful information, because its mission the mission of the institution of the land registry is to give certainty, to give specifically legal certainty. Another thing that has to be considered is, and also some concept as Michael and Joe explained before, is that the information contained in the property registry is already public and accessible to all. It's open to all that have a legitimate interest. This is information contained in the registry about who owns the land, its extension, possible charts or encumbrance, is already available and is already provided to anyone who justifies a legitimate interest. In Spain, we have to say that this information is accessible both physically, in person, and online. There are online systems to provide access to all the land registry information. Not only that, the land registry in Spain has the ability to operate entirely digitally. There's a digital submission service to send documents to the land registry via an electronic customer service interface. Property registries play a fundamental role in preventing real estate fraud, the misuse of electronic land registration data, and in the fight against money laundering. The Spanish land registries have put into place internal controls and have strengthened checks to detect and deter fraud and prevent the misuse of information obtained from online land registries. One of these measures that we can talk about and that has been launched recently is the Property Alert Monitoring Service. What is this service? Well, it's a service that is been very helpful in preventing fraud, as it alerts the owner of the property via email or a text message whenever any transaction arrives relating to his or her property. Also, the land registrars and all their employees are continually trained to detect fraud. On top of that, we have a Center for the Prevention of Money Laundering that investigates internal alerts when the existence of fraud is suspected. Also, we can say that we are providers of ADAS compliant qualified electronic signature. It has been proved that external electronic identification methods, such as these electronic signatures, in the electronic conveyance of real estate will help to reduce fraud and theft of information. In regards to the open data, and with this I will finish, we have to say that the Spanish Land Registry already offers open data. We offer data information regarding the statistics from land, business, and mobile property registers. And we also offer geographic information of the registered property with legally determined boundaries through the GeoPortal. Here you can see the GeoPortal that we have in the Spanish Land Registry. We provide a scaled view portal of open data, which includes information on land and building registry, environmental and urban information. It is a free service available to all 24 hours and is continually updated. And it has been very useful. Here you can see one example of it. This is the land affected by the volcano. I don't know if you remember, I think it was, yes, last year. All the land affected by the volcano in La Palma, in the Canary Island, that is showed in the geoportal. So people could access to the geoportal and see if their land was affected or not by the volcano eruptions. In conclusion, and with this I finish, the data economy and the need for open data places challenges, but also gives opportunity for land administration authorities to continue providing trustworthy services on the basis of which society and individuals can develop. Thank you everyone for your attention, and I give back the floor to Pilar.
Thank you very much, Jimena. It is high importance to be aware of the risks and challenges that we are facing when providing data to general public, mainly in land registries, which deal with so much important data, as you said. And it's also really interesting to talk about how different countries apply or establish mechanisms to prevent fraud and money laundering, such as the Property Alert Monitoring Service, and also having a center for preventing money laundering. It is also really interesting to see a concrete example of how we can access to the data which is provided by land registries with this geoportal, and how it can help as it has with the volcano issue. So thank you very much, Jimena. I know that there's a debate going on in the chat about tax information and if it is included in land registries. So you think it's fine? We'll go over it after all the presentations, so we can go a bit more in detail. And also there's another question about the Spanish land property registry that I will raise afterwards. I will go with our last speakers first, which are the speakers from the land portal. We will be having two people. We'll have Mr. Charlton Bayer, who has more than 20 years experience in land administration, land data and governance in private, public and academic service. He's currently the Land Information Management Advocacy Consultant for the Land Portal Foundation and has led multinational projects and consultancies related to land governance and land data. And also we will have Ms. Natalia Carfi, who is the Executive Director of the Open Data Charter. She's also the former Open Government Director for the Undersecretary of Public Innovation and Open Government of Argentina, where she coordinated the co-creation of the third Open Government National Action Plan. She was the Open Government Coordinator for the Digital Division of the Government of Chile and for the City of Buenos Aires. She's part of the Open Data Leaders Network and the Academic Committee of the International Open Data Conference. And they will be presenting us the Open Up Guide on Land Governance. So please, the floor is yours. I don't know who's starting.
I thank you, Pilar, for that intro. I will be starting myself. Let me go through the critical moment of sharing the screen. I think you should be seeing my screen now.
Yes, we can see it well. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. So this is a project that we have where we have collaborated the Open Data Charter with the Land Portal to create a practical tool to help promote open data in the land community. So let me share briefly who we are. The Open Data Charter is a global organization that works with governments and civil society organizations from around the world. We have over 150 endorsers all around the world. You can see there a little map where you can see in orange all the national governments that have adopted the charter, and on blue spots, blue dots, the subnational governments that have adopted the charter. And we've been around for almost 7 years now. So we've been working globally for that long. The Open Data Charter actually is based on the 6 global principles on open data. So you can see here the 6 principles. I won't go into much detail about them. They're pretty straightforward, but just to let you know that that's our framework of work. And understanding that data should be opened with a purpose and not just for the sake of it. So open data as a means to solve a public problem and to guarantee access to information. The Open Data Charter started collaborating with thematic experts to develop what is now known as the Open Up Guides. As of now, we have 4 Open Up Guides and on 4 different themes, as you can see here. 1 on agriculture, 1 on climate action, 1 on anti-corruption, and the last one where we collaborated with Land Portal is the 1 on land governance. This tool is aimed to be used by governments to collect, manage, and release sectorial data. And we're not here creating new standards. We're just gathering all the information and all the standards, open standards that are being used already, to try to come up with a tool that is practical and understandable for everybody trying to tackle an open data, a thematic open data policy. When you see an Open Up Guide, this is the content that you'll find: key data sets, how the data should be collected, stored, shared, and published, good data policies and frameworks, including metadata, that, as I said, the already existing standards, and governance frameworks if they are available. A review on existing gaps or challenges on these thematic policies in particular, and where we found them, use cases from real life examples, so you can actually understand a little bit better what we're talking about. The Open Data Charter has already implemented this Open Up Guides globally. So I wanted to share a little bit of what we've learned so far before leaving the floor to Land Portal, to Tommy. So we do not only need, when we're talking about open data policies, no matter what the theme is, and in this case we're talking about land, but it could be around any of the core themes that we worked with. We're not just talking about data interoperability. We need to also work on people's interoperability. So what we've found working with governments is that there's different areas from government that haven't been connecting well with each other. And we've found, for example, two public offices actually trying to create the same data, not knowing that the office next door is actually working on the same data set. So having those conversations, bringing people together, making a participatory open data policy, it's super important. Then we understood that the guides, once again, no matter what the topic it's about, it's super important and useful for multi-stakeholder conversations because it sets the stage and manages expectations on what we're talking about. So we all have the information about which data sets we're talking, which are the standards that already exist. And from there, you can set a stage to have this participatory process around this open data, thematic open data policy. Part of that is also lesson learned number 3, work with users and constant feedback from the beginning. So it's not just an idea of publish and they will come, they will use the data. It's trying to bring in potential reusers from the get-go, understanding the data demand side before you go into the publication process, if you will. Another lesson that is super important is to do data assessments to manage expectations. So understanding where you're starting from, which data exists, which data is digitalized, which data is not digitalized, which data is actually forbidden to be collected because of regulations, as the speakers before me talked about. So managing expectations to a participatory process and understanding where everybody is at and being transparent about this, about the data assets that exist and don't exist, it's important also for these processes. Then 4 more lessons and I'll leave the floor. Data production and documentation to understand and actually be able to improve data quality, it's critical for any open data policy. So you might not get it right at the beginning, but if you haven't documented the creation of the data, you won't be able to actually work on improving the data quality that is needed. Then, as we always promote, participation around open data policies. So open data should be also promoted as a way to enhance informed participation. So in order for citizens to be able to understand what's going on, we need to be able to promote the data that is being opened and not just leave it there on an open data portal for the sake of it. When possible, of course, develop APIs, which is it's like a little technical, maybe for people not from the open data community, but those from the open data community will understand the development of APIs actually promote reuse and make like a specific connection with the development community, which also will help promote data reuse. And then this seems like a rather simple lesson, but resource allocation and the monitoring of the progress is super important. So it's not, open data policies should not be just like one more thing that a civil servant should do. You should have resources allocated for people to actually work on an open data policy from government. And also, of course, you should be able to connect those among themselves, as I said, to try to break the silos between public offices. And I'll leave the floor to my colleague, Thomas.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for that overview, Nati. Just very quickly, the land portal seeks to engage in a conversation about opening data and managing data related to land, as well as to create and share knowledge about data and land, but also to provide a platform, especially for the voices that are often not heard, in making data more accessible and having their voices given more prominence. And the open data role that we fulfill is really just one part, a core part of our activities. And a couple of the things that we are doing is really to try and map the information ecosystems that relate to land, to provide support to information providers, to create, open up, and utilize open data with the overall goal of democratizing the information ecosystem in order to strengthen the flows of land governance data from all perspectives and all levels. So we took our inspiration really from land administration theory. Land governance is the way in which public actors use, control, and provide access to land in a way that has social legitimacy and is fundamentally democratic. And land administration, modern land administration theory really posits that we have moved beyond, the land administration has moved beyond, let me say, the role of the land registry, but as a mechanism supporting sustainable development. So the land administration functions need to be supported by a policy framework and an information infrastructure that is relevant in a particular country context. And it really functions to support social, economic, and environmental development. We already know that the open data movement made explicit the link between open data and sustainable development. And land governance data and information is really necessary for monitoring this level of performance, which means it needs to be readily, freely, timely available, standardized, and widely distributed to increase its impact. You're about 2 slides behind, Laura. So what is open land governance data? I will just briefly mention that. We talk about digital data that is based on common standards, structured for download, protected for privacy and security, but also formatted consistently for legal use. In terms of the Open Up Guide for Land Governance, ODC, together with the Land Portal, has developed a methodology to assess country land governance information. This process has started in a number of countries, and we are currently implementing the Open Up Guide in Madagascar and Senegal. And the idea is to use it to support improved data access and capacity development, to identify relevant land data that can be digitized or that is ready for digitization or even optimization, and to help countries understand the use of data standards that are applicable for land governance data, and also to explore gaps in standardization, and to eventually prioritize these resources for the opening up of more land data. The State of Open Data report found that large donor investments in land registration systems made very little resources available for open data or open data components related to these land governance projects. Now, what are the land management functions? The one that we've talked about today clearly is the land tenure function, the registration of titles and deeds, but that is complemented by the land value and taxation functions, the functions around land use, around land development, and this is in support of sustainable development and underpinned by a land information infrastructure. And in our approach, and I think one of the speakers mentioned that the land registry does not exist to collect and provide data. It actually exists to provide certain services and functions. And that is the inspiration we've taken for the Open Up Guide, to say, what are the typical land administration functions? And then to look at the data that is derived by the carrying out of those functions. And so that means the core data categories identified in the Open Up Guide relate to data on our relationships with land. So these are titles, deeds, mortgages, rights that have been transferred, but also data concerning the markets, value of property, taxation of property, the land market in essence, and land use data, which is land use, the control of spatial planning, planning of land, but also data on the development of planning for new buildings, building infrastructure, roads, and how these permit applications are mentioned. Natalie, please go on to the next slide and the next one. Sorry about that, colleagues. So we implement this process over 2 phases that contains 3 components. The first component in phase 1 is to map the information ecosystem. That includes the land registry, tax offices that relate to land, municipal authorities that deal with planning applications. The second step after mapping the information ecosystem is to do a bit more technical data analysis to understand how much of that information actually complies with open data standards. And then the final component is to develop a roadmap or action plan for opening up new data. We see this really as a process rather than an outcome. So moving from data to open data is a process and a trajectory through which we must work together with partner organizations. Briefly, we list here a number of land data policies and standards. They are on the next slide. And also, I want to just spend a little bit of time, 1 minute, on the issues and challenges that we've experienced so far. Next slide, Nati. The current state for land data is that there's limited land tenure data online, even when it is digital. And I should say, often we find, especially in developing countries, the data is there, it's digital, but often after it is submitted and it finds its way into the service processes, the data is changed to analog data. We also find that there's some social and political concerns around opening up land governance data, and what would that mean? And I think a big part of addressing this challenge is making it clear that opening up data is also about improving public sector land administration and public sector service provision. Opening up data is a benefit for government to improve government service provision rather than a service for external entities. But this requires trust between the citizenry and government, and that the government and the data is trusted in that process. We should also be careful always to consider that in opening up data, the purpose is to reduce inequity, not to facilitate inequality. And there's some inherent risks that we have to accommodate, but we need to build on government services and how they can address some of the fears that they have. But all of this requires open data policies at national level for collection, storage, stewardship, publication of government data, as well as analytical and technical capabilities for advanced information analysis and improving land governance decision-making based on more open data. I thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your presentation, for introducing us the Open Up Guide and all the problems, issues, and challenges you faced by collecting information, and also why it is important to find a way to have information open for governments and for doing a good use of the information that would serve all the citizens. So yeah, thank you very much. I would like now to open the debate, and I would like to start by the first question, which was made in the chat, and I think it was addressed to Mihai, who was talking about in general the EU land registry systems. And he was talking about connecting the tax information to the information given by the land property registries. It has already been answered by some people giving their vision of their different countries. So I would start with Mihai, and if someone else wants to intervene, just raise your hand and you can give your opinion. Thank you.
Excuse me, I think I missed a little bit of the discussion. I had to answer a call. Are we talking about the taxes?
They are asking, well, if no, please, the person, Neil, if he wants to ask the question. It's about introducing the tax information in the land registries and to what extent it is controlled. That's what I understood, but if Neil wants to intervene, please do so.
As far as I know, there are some land registry systems which already provide information regarding the value of the tax paid, or sometimes even condition the registration to the proof that the tax was paid. But this does not apply to all the land registry systems, as far as I know. Of course, I'm talking about European member states. And particularly talking about Romania, we don't deal directly with this issue, because there are other entities like public notaries which has to check if the tax is paid. However, there are cases when we are interested in this issue, because sometimes the value of the fee that has to be paid to the land registry is related to the value of the tax.
Thank you very much for your answer, Mihai. I don't know if anyone wants to make any intervention or to add something to this. Okay.
I can just explain my comment.
Oh yeah, thank you. Are you Neil? Yeah.
I'm also from the land portal. I just was, we see in developing countries that, the lack of tax revenue, especially from property taxes, is like a major hindrance to development. And I mean, obviously in Europe, people pay property taxes, but my question is just like, you know, like how does it doesn't seem to be fully connected as like in the United States, if you go to the cadastral system, you can say who owns the property, the history of sales of the property, the amount of taxes and the evolution of the taxes over the years. So everything's all together in one system. I'm just just wondering if that could be beneficial for Europe or ultimately for developing countries, or in terms of openness. And that's it.
Yeah, please, Mihai.
Yeah, I think it depends also on how land registry is developed, because as we know, there are different types of land registries, and depending on the, let's say, the legal traditions, there are quite relevant differences. Cadastre has, if we look back in history, we can see that cadastre is has started as a basis for the tax evaluation. Of course, it evolved during the time, but we had to define what cadastre means and what land administration or land registry means, because land registry is more related to the legal aspects, and sometimes the tax issue is not so relevant from this perspective. However, this might become a very extended discussion, because starting from this point, we can discuss about how land registry act actually. And in relation with the cadastre, because the tax is related to the cadastre, it's important to see what kind of relation is between the cadastre and land registry. And we also had a study made in our association, European Land Registry Association, regarding the relation between cadastre and land registry. And we may say that there are three types of situations. Cadastre and land registry as totally different institutions. Cadastre and land registry as different institutions, but with a strong connection, coordinated. And we have cadastre and land registry as a unique institution. For instance, as we have in Romania, we have merged cadastre with the land registry in 2005. And we have workflows, complementary workflows for both of them. But I don't want to extend the discussion further.
Thank you, Mihai. I think Charles wanted to say something as well about it.
Yes, no, I was just going to say that I think to emphasize Mihai's point that historically land registries and the cadastre developed as a mechanism for taxes and taxation of land rights. But if you look at the US, for example, in their land registry system, it is often considered by many other countries to be not a particularly advanced system. It's very localized. It functions at a local level. It is often analog. And in some ways, it mirrors the land registries of 40, 50, and 60 years ago in many countries, where at a local level, this kind of information was easily accessible. And this is a common history of land registries. What has changed is that I think the open and transparent character of land registries became a very different beast in a digital environment where you are able to combine at great speed a lot more different data sets and information sources with some more potential negative consequences. And this has inevitably placed more emphasis on not always integrating, on more protection, on protecting privacy. So our current debate on, I would say, open data in the land administration system is a little bit different than it was 50, 60 years ago in an analog system. And I think this is a tension that we are still also in the process of resolving. How do we facilitate innovation, more connectedness, without allowing this new power to become completely invasive of people's privacy and unintended consequences?
Thank you, Charles. I don't know if any of the other of these speakers want to add something, or you want me to go through another question. So if not, I'll go through another question who's made to Jimena, and they were asking her about how can the land registries specifically address the issue of open data and how the information in Spain is given, and how is the legitimate interest taken into account. So Jimena.
Thank you, Pilar. Well, as I said before, the majority of the data in the land registry is personal data. So land registry is a public institution, so we have to abide by the existing legislation. So nowadays, in compliance with GDPR and all the Spanish and European legislation, we cannot offer open data as raw data. We cannot do it. We have to abide by the law. But also, we have to take into account the complexity of the data. It is not easy to differentiate between personal and non-personal data. If it has to be done, it will be a very hard working job, I have to say, because it's not very easy. As somebody said before, I think also we have to take into account the difference between the analog and the digital land registries. In Spain, we are a digital land registries, but this does not mean that all the data is prepared to be put into the open. It is not easy, and it is not. It cannot be done with the existing regulation. However, and looking into the future, I would like to say that land registers are a part of the data processing cycle, the storage, the collection, the managing. So I think we can also be a part of the final end of the process. We can also, we will be able, we could and we will be able to help with the anonymization process that is necessary to put all the data as open data. We can help with this because somebody has to do it. Logically, it cannot be the person or persons who are going to use this raw data. Somebody before has to prepare this data as open data. I don't know if I make myself understood. I think this is the way we can, in land registries, can look into the future, and we can encourage the sharing and reusing of data. And in the chat, somebody told me that, and it is true, that the statistic information that we offer, it is not open data. Thank you for the position, it's totally accurate. But the geospatial information we offer in the Geo portal, that is open data. Most of it, I don't know if all, but most of it can be downloaded. So I encourage you to look and try. Thank you, Pilar.
Thank you, Jimena. I don't know if someone from the audience wants to make an intervention, because I see them talking by the chat. So if anyone wants to make a comment or to ask the panelists something, because I see some comments.
I think somebody is saying that. Sorry, I think somebody is saying that it is an excuse, but an actual reason.
Sorry.
Yes, I think Alberto is saying. Disagree. You could release the data without personal data. We do not have. The information is not structured. We cannot say this is that. This is personal. This is not personal. It is not technical. How do you say technological possible? It is not an excuse. It cannot be done today. And why cannot be done today? Because no law allows it. if a law goes tomorrow and says all the data from the land registry has to be put into the open, we will have to do it, and we will have to differentiate between this personal data and non-personal data. And I can assure you, it will be a very hard work, but it is not possible now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimena. I think also Neil is saying in the chat that in the US it depends on the county as well. And Charlie, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say what Jimena said is that anonymizing registry data is, I think, quite feasible and quite possible. The question is, what would be the benefit for the registry to invest the time and the money and the effort in anonymizing the data and releasing that data? And here, I think, is where engaging the broader government perspective becomes critical, because government departments need to see them providing a service to the public, but they can also be providing services to other government departments. Because if you anonymize registrar data, there's valuable information about the land market, about mortgaging, about land use, ownership that doesn't have to be personal, that is critical for land governance, for decision making. And so I think opening up data must be seen from the perspective not only of the private sector being able to download and acquire government data, but how other government departments can improve functions and service delivery through access to open data that derives from government, because they are in a big part, when it comes to land data, they are the major custodians of land data. And I think if you understand, and if government understands the benefit of opening up the data, not only for one government department, but for service delivery across government, then you start having a conversation about making it worthwhile to invest the time, the effort in anonymizing the data and releasing that data.
Thank you, Tal. I think Mihai wants to add something.
To answer to Char, I think it's not about the benefit to the land registry. Rather, it's about the benefit for the citizen, because we have to draw somehow a line between what information represent open data, public information, and what is private. And listening to you, I remember that I had an interesting discussion a few years ago regarding the searches by name. And this becomes a little bit philosophical, because the real question is why some information has to be public, not only regarding to the land registry. Generally speaking, why some information has to be public. Of course, there are a lot of reasons to have public information, but we will also find reason to keep information private, at least at some level. And we were talking about searches, how to allow searches by name. Should that be allowed or not? Is it a benefit for the system? Is it a benefit for the private entities? And trying to figure out the right answer, we start to ask ourselves why someone who would search about someone else's assets. And we realize that if we take into consideration the good faith, there are just two reasons to make such a search. So you should look for someone else's property in case you are a creditor or you are a heir. Otherwise, there is no reasonable understanding of such a quest. So if there is not another reason, this kind of information should stay protected. I just try to give an example of how open land registries should be. And I think that someone said before me, I don't know who I'm quoting now. Someone said that land registry should stay as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So it's very important to define how far can we dig into the land registry information, because as Jimena said, land registries has a lot of information. Land registry can restructure information to create new information, and sometimes what at the beginning is open data combined with different information can become more private information, more personal data that should be protected.
Thank you, Mihai. I don't know if Joao wants to add something, because someone asked asking about how people and how corporations can use these technologies we're talking about, and particularly blockchain, and benefit from using precisely this information and the open data, and to what extent.
Good question. I did mention technology, and it has been mentioned in passing. Well, I think technologies such as that one, they may be, and they will be a boon for certain areas of the law, but they'll be pretty complicated for other areas, including land registry. For example, let's say blockchain, which is very fashionable right now. It will be open data will be fantastic element in the viability of smart contracts, which, well, they are programmed there to execute themselves on an if-then basis. If certain conditions are met, then a title will be transferred or payment will be disbursed, and open data, or at least the purveyors of open data, government, the public administration, they can act as what is typically called as oracles, entities outside the blockchain that provide information that will be processed within the blockchain to meet the if and then start the chain of the then. So, to meet the condition that is the if of the smart contract. But, in terms of land registry, I think it will be a proverbial can of worms. It will be far more complicated by the way that, say, blockchain works, because typically in blockchain, there are several nodes, that is what users are called nodes, that are full. And by definition, to keep the blockchain to keep it as stable and safe as possible, they hold all the information. And that includes information that is personal, and identificative information, and information behind the curtain, as Mihai was mentioning earlier. And the possession of that information that information is raw data. We'll be talking about raw data. That information is raw data. That is complete information about everything in the blockchain. So if you move the land registry to blockchain, for example, we're probably far apart from that, using it in elections or for land registry. But if you use it, there will be people who would hold that raw data that registries right now don't have. And that raw data included elements that are personal, that are identificative, and so it could be used for, or there is the potential risk of it being used for, at the best, commercial purposes, at the worst, well, criminal activities such as money laundering, etc., or at least aiding in those activities, in the commission of those crimes. So, yeah, I think for some open data in connection with certain technologies will be a great thing. For other things, it will be, well, potentially dystopian. I don't know. In land registry, it will be, it will present many challenges, not the least the necessity that users in systems and technologies like blockchain will hold all the information, all the raw data, which is Otherwise, it wouldn't be blockchain. You need to do that in order to keep it stable and safe from hacking. And yeah, so well, in a sentence, for a lot of things, open data in association with those technologies, open technologies will be fantastic. For other things, will be problematic. In terms of land registry, probably problematic into that end of the spectrum for several reasons, not the least of them the potential dissemination of data that is meant to be closed off.
Thank you so much, Joao. We're already telling me we're 5 minutes away. So thank you so much, you all, for all the intervention. It's been really, really interesting. And it has also been a great pleasure to have this debate. I'm sure we will be listening a lot about this topic, and the discussion is not done yet about it. So we will move forward. And thank you so much to all the participants as well. I announced the next webinar, which will be on the 19th of May of 2022, about socioeconomic benefits of geospatial information. And it will also, you have in the chat the registration link. And I'll give the word to Amy to close it up. But thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying a bit over time. The discussion was super interesting, and this is just the beginning. So please keep in touch, and we'll keep on sending you more information about the upcoming webinars, as well as the recording, and the presentations will be available online. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.